Campus London. Can you hear me okay?
Wow. Hi, everybody.
How's everyone doing?
Excellent.
Yes, okay. Hello, my name is Sarah Drinkwater. I head up campus. This is Google Space for Entrepreneurs. Hands up if you've been to campus before. Okay. That makes me very happy. Hands up if it's your first time. Welcome. Welcome, Eric.
Thank you.
We are delighted to welcome Eric Ries tonight. He's one of your top dream speakers for campus. We've waited for this for a really long time. A few quick housekeeping things. The bathrooms are right at the back. The fire exit is out the front door. And Twitter is Campus London. And if you tweet really well, it'll be on this screen. So I think that's a really good incentive, right? And tonight really is all about you. So hands up in the audience if you're a founder. Hands up if you work for an early stage startup. If you work for a corporate. Wonderful, an amazing mix. I love it. So I'm going to ask about 8 questions, but really tonight is about your Q&A. I'm going to really briefly introduce Eric, although he needs no introduction. Who's bought their lean startup with them, by the way? Yeah. And pointing out the front 3 rows all got your book as well. So I feel like there's a lot of Eric books in the house tonight. Here as well. Okay. Eric Ries is an entrepreneur and the author of the international bestseller. I know this is really embarrassing for you,
totally.
Right?
I'm not here.
The international bestseller, The Lean Startup, which has sold over 1 million copies and been translated into 30 languages. He's founded a number of startups, including IMVU, where he was CTO, and has advised on business and product strategy for startups, venture capital firms, and large companies, including General Electric. Eric has served as an EIR at Harvard Business School, my favorite IDEO, and Pivotal, and he's the founder and CEO of the Long-Term Stock Exchange. Welcome, Eric Ries.
Thank you.
So obviously we have an audience here that's very diverse, but for the most part they're really early stage founders.
Yeah.
And I wanted to take you back to your first time founding a company. Ooh. You were super young, right?
That was terrible, yeah. Yeah. Yes, I'm happy to talk about it.
Yeah. Okay, tell us a bit more. So obviously you were at university at the time.
Yeah, so if you've seen the movie The Social Network, anybody has? Yeah. I had the first half of the movie experience. I was at an Ivy League school in the United States. I had a great idea. See, this idea sounds like a good idea, a winner for you. My idea was that students from top colleges should create online profiles for the purpose of sharing. Almost a really good idea, except we wanted them to create the profiles to share with employers to get a job. So we missed Facebook by just a couple of degrees, and also we were total idiots and no idea what we were doing. So I'm a computer science major. I was programming computers since I was a kid. I'm just that stereotypical, startup person in the technology world, like to a T. It helps that I look the part, I guess. We'll get to that, I'm sure. We'll talk about Silicon Valley and its problems. And so I happened to be getting my CS degree when the dot-com bubble hit. And everybody and their mother was creating a startup, so it seemed like the kind of thing that I should do. And I had absolutely no idea what a startup was. I didn't know anything about business. I was just like, I'm going to make this awesome product, and then like zillions of people are going to use it, and we're going to make a ton of money, like somehow, like underpants gnome style, okay? Like really make this awesome thing, something great is going to happen, then we make a lot of money. That was my complete and total understanding of entrepreneurship. And I didn't even realize how screwed we were until after the dot-com bubble crashed. Obviously, we were toast then. All you needed to know about the investors who invested in us is that they invested in us to know that they obviously lost everything in the dot-com bubble when it crashed, because how good of an investor could you be if you're investing in us? Afterwards, I was on a job interview after the fact, and someone asked me, at the level of strategy, knowing what you know now, how would you have done it differently? And I was like, oh yeah, well we would have made sure we got customers, and we would have definitely had a good product instead. And he's like, no, I understand. Now, obviously, you know the answer, of course you would have, but like, how would the strategy have been different? I had this moment where I was like, I don't know what that question means. I'm like, I can't bullshit my way out of this interview because I literally have no idea what he's asking me. Well, I was like, I didn't want to be like, what's the strategy? Because that seemed like the kind of thing I was supposed to know, having been the co-founder of a technology startup that was claiming to be smarter than everybody else. And I was like, oh, maybe there's a body of knowledge here that I should maybe learn something about. So yeah, that was my very rude introduction to the world of entrepreneurship. If you have a favorite entrepreneurship movie, not just Social Network, but like Ghostbusters. Any Ghostbusters fans? Ghostbusters is an amazing entrepreneurship movie. Like those guys get thrown out of a university lab because their technology is too daring, And my favorite little bit is that, among many amazing scenes in that movie, when the very first customer actually walks in the door, like first customer like literally falls in their lap, they don't remember what they're doing at the time. They are having lunch. They are eating the last of the petty cash. So they are actually down to their very last dollar, and they are going to go out of business that very day. Luckily, Zool invades Manhattan. That day, like what incredible timing. If Zool had waited 2 weeks, there'd be no Ghostbusters, they would have been bankrupt.
Well, that's a really good question, right? Like I also think about when they move into the fire station, and it's a mess, but they hustle and make it work, right?
Oh, totally. It's all make it work photo montage style. All the interesting and hard parts of entrepreneurship happen in the photo montage, always. Because they're too boring to be in the movie. Can you imagine the product prioritization meetings they must have had? Like, nobody wants to watch that, right? Like when they go from first customer to be on cover of magazines, that takes about 60 seconds in the movie. It's like nobody wants to can you imagine with like refund policy, sales operations, like nightmare customer service calls they must have? Like nobody wants to hear about that. That's super boring.
And it's not even like the drama of like the midnight crying, right? It's the boring stuff.
Oh, it's the really boring stuff. It's the hard part of entrepreneurship. And so anyway, in the movie, in any movie like that, the most satisfying part psychologically when you watch is the moment when the plucky protagonist gets to go back to the people that doubted them and say, haha, I was right, and you were wrong, and you said this would never work, and it did, whatever. Like, that's really fun. Especially if you're an entrepreneur, it can be especially fun. So in real life, you actually get the really wonderful experience of going back to those people and being like, you were right. You told me not to drop out of school, do this stupid thing, because it wouldn't work, and it didn't, just like you said, and now I'm back in school. Awesome. Such a painful experience, so humiliating. And here's the thing. If you want to be right most of the time, you should just be an extreme skeptic. Just say that nothing will ever work. Because most things don't work. So those people are so smug. Like, oh, well, you predicted that this wouldn't work. Also, nothing else would ever work. Congratulations, that's terrific, right? Like, your hit rate is 99%, so you think that's really impressive. But nothing ever works. Like, that's the reality of entrepreneurship. And I feel like we totally sweep it under the rug. We claim we understand that most startups fail, but like, really? Do we really understand that they blow up and the company dies and you have to go apologize? It's a horrible experience. So that was my introduction to entrepreneurship. It was great. Just awesome.
Amazing. I love the fact that encompassed Ghostbusters, personal humility, every area of the spectrum.
No problem. Yeah.
What do you? Where did you go in those days for education? Where did you go to kind of seek inspiration, connection, community? Where did you go for that kind of thing?
There was nothing. None of that stuff existed. There was no Y Combinator. There were no blogs. So there were therefore no startup blogs. There were no books about entrepreneurship. There was nothing. The section in the store was called small business. You could learn about how to get a small business loan or how to make a business plan to take to a bank. It was absolutely, positively nothing. Everything we knew about tech entrepreneurship was by hearsay, word of mouth, or like what we read in the press about some fancy company being funded. In other words, nothing. We knew absolutely nothing. I mean, we are living in a golden age of extremely detailed knowledge and mentorship and co-working. There were no co-working spaces. Like, we had to negotiate office leases. There was no AWS. Like, you had to physically rack the damn servers yourself. The first version, I can't even, I mean, like, we have it so good now. It's so great. The ability, in the book I talk about taking an old Karl Marx idea, that now you can rent the means of production. He would have been like, what?
He'd be spinning right now.
Right? It's so great. If you have, every day, the number of businesses under the curve of what you can start with your own credit card and no permission is getting a little bit larger every day. So like right now, can you create like a combined cycle power plant with your credit card? Like, no, you still have to go do that at GE. But like every day, the kind of thing you can do with a credit card and a Kickstarter campaign is increasing. I just got a pitch from a company doing 3D holographic, whatever, and it's just like, yeah, they could go like spend 5 years doing a massive Chinese production and distribution deal, or they could be on Kickstarter tomorrow raising like $5 million. I was trying to pitch them to build the little Star Wars chess set thing, holographic thing, like time that with the release of the movie, and boom, you're gonna have like all the money you could possibly want. So like, just the idea that is just like, oh yeah, well, sure, I'll just do a Kickstarter campaign and raise unlimited money or a token sale, or it's just like unbelievably cool. And for all the complaints people have, I've been in London only 2 days, so people have complained to me about the London venture scene only 75 times already. oh, it's so hard to raise money here. There's no growth capital, da-da-da-da-da-da. I'm like, compared to what? Okay, I get it's not Sand Hill Road yet, but I'm not talking about 1776 here. Like, I'm just talking about, these stories I'm telling you are from 20 years ago. That's it. Like that there is a venture capital ecosystem. I was raising money from individual angels who were like in the jewelry business, or like they had no understanding. None of us had any understanding of technology. Anyway, things are really good for startup hubs all over the world. So much so, compared to how it was even just a few years ago. It's remarkable the progress we've made.
I concur, and I love this optimism. This is a good spirit, particularly because we are in the UK, centre of pessimism, sometimes. And we're proud of that. Yeah. But I'm curious about when you were kind of working on the methodology for Lean Startup.
Sure.
Did you ever think it would become this kind of movement?
No. That's why I love the bio. The obligatory bio inflation that you have when you become a professional expert. Like, it should say most absolute majority of everything this person has ever worked on in their life has failed. So hi everybody, I'm a big failure, and if you follow me, you can be a big failure too, huh? Who's with me, right? I mean, yeah, it gets totally edited out of these things, which I appreciate, but I mean, it's silly almost. And yeah, I had zero clue that this was going to be a big deal. I remember the first time someone called me for permission to create a Lean Startup meetup group in San Francisco. I was like, why are you calling me? I said, okay, first of all, you don't need my permission. You just do whatever you want. What do you need my blessing for? Just go if you want to do that. But I was like, that's a horrible idea. No one is going to come to your meetup group. And he's like, well, if the people will come, will you come be our first speaker for the first meeting? I was like, oh, here's a cost-free promise if I ever had one. Like, since the people won't come, sure, of course. I was like, who's going to come? And he calls me back. We got 250 people in this meetup group, and you have to come talk. I was like, what? And then people started calling me up. How come we don't have one in Los Angeles? I'm like, I don't know. And then I was touring. I was getting a lot of public speaking in those days, and I show up in a city, and I eventually got the shtick. I was like, hey, just so you know, there's a Lean Startup meetup in San Francisco and in New York and LA and Austin. Anyway, and they'd be like, wait, why isn't there one in Cleveland? And thi'd be like, you, sir, are in charge of the Lean Startup meetup group. Like, go make it so. So this totally grassroots thing just sprung up, and people got so excited about it. So I really had no clue that was coming, nor did I really. It took me a couple of years to even understand what the hell was happening. Like, it's been very surreal for me, and of course I feel very grateful by the enthusiasm that people have had for it. And I even talk a little bit in the new book about people now can't even process that when I first started writing about Lean Startup, people thought it was just the dumbest thing they ever heard. It was not a popular idea at all, especially in Silicon Valley, where people thought I was really nuts. And now, I meet kids coming out of Stanford and Berkeley, and to them these ideas are so obvious. They're like, I can't believe somebody had to write a book about it. And I'm like, I'm about to blow your mind. Ready? The book came out in 2011. They're like, whoa, I would have thought 1980. I thought it was old. I'm just like, oh, Jesus Christ. Yeah, so look, it's a remarkable experience to have seen it grow and go global and be in all these industries. And in the book, I talk a little bit about the range of companies and products I've gotten to work on with companies, kind of helping them adopt the ideas, out of software into manufacturing, into automotive, into healthcare. And you want to know about deep sea oil drilling or the physics of an MRI machine or credit default swaps, and you want to learn about internal IT projects like corporate consolidation and HR system. I mean, you name it, we've done it. All kinds of governments. Tomorrow we're doing a whole event for Lean Startup in the national security space. I mean, it's been a wild, wild ride as people have taken these ideas so much further than I ever would have imagined. And then they somehow think that I deserve the credit for that, which is totally wrong. It's like, you did the work to take this into a new field. You deserve the credit, but that's, I guess, you get to be the figurehead. You get to take credit for stuff. So I'm very grateful. Thank you for those of you who've made this happen. I really appreciate it.
I was, when I was doing research for this, the publishing date did surprise me, because I was like, wow, that's only 6-7 years ago.
I know, right?
It's crazy.
Right, it's crazy.
How, since that time, how has your thinking evolved? Has it evolved? Obviously, in the book, you're working with companies like General Electric, very diverse kinds of firms. How has your thinking around the methodology evolved since you kind of first wrote the book?
Well, first of all, one of the really hard things about being a human being is remembering what you used to think. It's actually one of the reasons why being an entrepreneur is so hard, because you pretend that you always knew the answer. It's also why VCs and corporate executives are the worst, because you like after months and months and months of pivoting and grueling data and failure, you're like, I finally figured out the answer. We have to make the product like this and not like that. And they're like, why didn't you just do that in the first place? Thanks, buddy. That's what I've been working on. You know, like, why did it take so long? It's so obvious. Like, everything is obvious once you know the answer. So, yes, I don't know. I think when I was forced recently to reread a bit of The Lean Startup, which, like, for an author, having to reread your old work is very painful. Because you're like, who wrote this? Oh. And there's a section in there, just to give you a kind of flavor of the before and after. I have this really bad habit in The Lean Startup of making recommendations in like 1 or 2 paragraphs. That's like 5 years of work for somebody to do the thing that I'm suggesting. So I'm like, hey, somebody should really, so I was like, hey, if you're scaling up your company, you should really create internal startup teams, and you should give them scarce but secure resources, a semi-autonomous, it's like 3 things you should really do. Anyway. Good luck with that. And moving on in the book to whatever. And people in the intervening years have been like, whoa, 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 how do I create an internal startup? And I'm like, it's obvious. You just, and I'm like, okay, but how do you fund it? And I'm like, you know, just with venture funding, right? And they're like, well, we do an annual appropriation system in my company, so how do I make it work for it? And I'm like, that's not going to work. And they're like, I know, but so what do I do? Like, how do I make it cross-functional when my organization works in silos? Who do they report progress to? What's the equivalent of a board of directors? Like, all this automatic knowledge that I just brought with me from the startup movement, as I started to work in corporate settings, I started to realize how much I knew about that and how many beliefs we have that are universal amongst us that we never ever talk about because they're too obvious to write down. Like my favorite is, did you know that sometimes small teams can beat big teams? Of course, we all know that, right? Everybody knows that. But when our tech companies grow up, notice how they throw big teams at problems? And they're like, how come that didn't work? Because we forgot the very elementary lesson. I mean, I'll pick on any companies in particular, but we all know who they are. We all know how they operate, right? Their internal budgeting becomes like Byzantine and more like a parliamentary decision-making process than rounds of discrete funding. There's no board of directors that you report to. We claim to be a meritocracy, but I call total BS on the whole thing. So we can talk more about that if you want, but I mean, like, just like each of these things that we used to believe so fervently, when our companies grow up, we like somehow have this amnesia about it. And it culminated for me, there was a moment when I was talking to a startup founder at like a hot unicorn startup. They were doing great. And he was having this real frustration moment when he was like, I told one of my teams to go build this new product. And I was like, really, like, you have full freedom to just be something bold and different and like go get us into this new market and make it work by whatever means necessary. And then a couple months passed, and I went to check in with them, and I'm like, awesome, how's it going? They're like, it's going great. I said, great. Tell me all the cool things you've shipped and what you've learned. And they're like, shipped? What do you mean? He's like, what do you mean? Well, we've been gathering requirements, and we've been negotiating the scope of the project with the branding group and the scalability group and the legal group and the IT group and da-da-da-da-da. He's like, you haven't shipped anything? They're like, no, we're almost done with the requirements gathering, and then we can start building. He's like, have you written any software? No. Do you have any customers? No. Have you shown anything to anybody? Like the legal team? Like, who doesn't work in this company? Like, of course not. He's like so mad at them. He's like, okay, don't you realize that if we had built this company in the early days, the way that you're trying to build this product now, we wouldn't be here having this conversation because we would have been out of business? And the team was like, no, I wasn't there. Like, what are you talking about? I don't know anything about that. I'm just following the rules that you yourself laid out. He was like, how dare you suggest such a thing? And then anyway, so he was calling me to blow off steam. He was pissed off about it. And I was like, okay, but you graduated from Techstars, or I can't remember if it was Y Combinator. I think it was Y Combinator. Whatever program it was he graduated, he's like, uh-huh. Like, if you had told Paul Graham that your plan was to spend the 12 weeks of Y Combinator gathering requirements, and that you didn't ship anything before demo day, what would he have said? And he's like, you would not say that to Paul Graham. He would have humiliated me in front of the whole group, and I would never risk such a. I was like, uh-huh. He's like, actually, now that you asked me that question, I would never have even thought to tell him that because, of course, like the very first day of Y Combinator, he immediately would have briefed us about build something that customers want. We had our weekly dinners where we shared progress updates. We had the mentors of the partners who made sure to. He's like going on all the reasons why you would never make that mistake. I was like, excellent. So how many of those resources that you yourself had as an early stage founder do you provide to your internal entrepreneurs? Any of them? They had a scarcity mindset because they had limited funding, but this team has unlimited funding. They just keep going as long as they make you happy. Did you provide them any mentors to help them understand how to do things in entrepreneurial? Do you provide a weekly dinner? Is there a demo day that they're working for? And he was like, oh my God, I'm an investor now? What? I'm the founder. And like, no, you're not. You're not the entrepreneur anymore. The people that work for you are supposed to be entrepreneurs. So it's actually a very difficult transition to make of thinking about what does it mean to have internal startups. So like, that's like 200 pages of this new book that I was like, hey, everybody, just build an internal startup. Go to it. So yeah, I was a little cavalier about some topics before.
But I'm super curious about what I love about the book is it explicitly says that entrepreneurship is a powerful tool for very different kinds of corporates, whether it's government or like massive bloated companies. And I think certainly for those in this room who, whether you work at a corporate, whether you work at a startup, it can feel a bit lonely sometimes in those kind of roles.
Horrible.
What do you think, I mean, what companies have you worked with that surprised you in terms of the way they've been thinking or working?
Sure, well there's two really major surprises for me. One was working at companies whose reputation is totally bureaucratic and sclerotic, and you'd be like, they could never innovate. And like actual bureaucracies, like the United States federal government, it's not as like a bastion of innovation and fast, agile thinking, generally speaking. I have met some astonishingly cool entrepreneurs who work at places like the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid. It's like, people are always like, well, I can't do innovation in my company. We're too political and bureaucratic. And I'm like, compared to Obamacare, I'm going to go with no on that one. I'm going to say if they can do it, you probably could do it. Like, I mean, just, the U.S. Army I spent time with and the intelligence community and just like places you really never expect this kind of thinking to take root. Not to mention, big multinationals like GE and P&G and Toyota, where they would have every reason to be defensive about it and be like, why, what the hell do you know about whatever? That's the positive surprise. It's been much better than I expected. The negative surprise is quite a few of our big tech companies have a significant amount of brain damage on this topic. And they have a public reputation about being so innovative. And then you go behind the firewall and you're just like, what do the people here do every day? Well, does anybody do any actual work here? Or just have thousands of people who sit around like making technology for its own sake? It's shocking to me. So it's actually been really interesting to see on the public face of the technology industry, we treat all our companies like they're the same, but they are not the same. And this plays out over years and decades. These companies get to product market fit and they're quite durable. Even if you badly mismanage them, they're more or less indestructible for a while. And then all of a sudden the thing collapses and we're always like, what could have caused that to happen? And I feel like having gotten to go behind the firewall a few of these places, it's been pretty stunning. So the difference between places that really take seriously the idea that we're going to harness the creativity and entrepreneurial talent of every employee and the places that only play lip service to that is quite stark on the inside.
I'm curious about, keep catching the eye, we've got a program running upstairs right now called Residency, and it's for post-seed machine learning startups, about 6 of them. And there's loads that are here today. And a lot of them are small teams, between sort of 5 and 12 people. What would be your feedback for the founders in the audience? How do you keep your teams motivated and at optimal kind of entrepreneurialism when your team is so small and you have to do your thing really well? Like, what kind of constraints do you think are positive in that situation?
Yeah, so these are companies funded externally or funded internally? Yeah, so you have a fixed amount of funding. So like, we forget how valuable scarcity is. Scarcity is the only force I've ever seen that can push back against scope creep. There's just no substitute for being able to say, oh, you want to add a feature to that? Well, guess what? If we don't ship this thing by this time, we're going to die. So no. Any other context, like every product management meeting you're ever in, someone says, I want to add a feature to it, and you're like, we can't afford it. They're like, yes, we can. Of course we can afford it. You just say you don't like my feature. Which is true. It's like, well, yeah, I just don't like your feature. That's right, but I'm in charge and you're not, so we're doing it my way. It's like, oh, we're doing it your way. Well, fine. It builds up all this resentment and nonsense, and it's, well, I'm going to find a way to get, versus we are going to die if we do not accomplish this one and only one thing. So a lot of the mechanics of lean startup, MVPs and pivots and innovation accounting are just about giving a small team like that a focusing mechanism to actually figure out what is the most important leap of faith assumption that we should be working on and how quickly can we experiment to do it. And even with all those advantages, most seed stage startups, and especially if you're in a hot sector, unfortunately machine learning is, so that can cause a lot of brain damage by itself because people are constantly telling you what geniuses you are and how great they want to add all this money to you and like all this nonsense. Like, you sometimes forget, wait, what is the problem we're solving again? And who's the customer? And what do we have to do to survive? And we use the scientific method to overcome conceptual and psychological biases that we have as human beings. So, the old saying is startups don't starve, they drown. Like, you have too many good ideas. The technology is available to do, anything, can be anything to everybody, and the machine learning can learn anything at all. And it's like, well, before we build Skynet, is there anything else it could be good for in the meantime, right? Like, does it have to achieve self-sentience, or could we maybe, lower our ambitions to build an MVP that does something for somebody and solves, like can we actually drive a real use case? So I would be very, very vigilant in a machine learning startup to be really hyper-focused on a single use case. Certainly, I hope you all have customers already. If you haven't sold anything to any customers yet, then how do you know what the customers actually want? You have a set of requirements, but guess what? The laws of physics are required. Everything else is optional. So what's really required? If you're not selling anything to anybody, you have no idea. Of course, when I say selling, not everything has to be sold for cash. We have a concept in the lean startup called the exchange of value. So anyway, there's a whole methodology to this. If you're just kind of randomly adding features to a product because it sounds cool, don't do that.
I've only got a couple more questions, and then it's your turn. Do be thinking of your questions. You travel the world. You go everywhere, and you meet lots of big and small companies. I know that you've been to London a few times in the last couple of years, and despite the funding complaints, which I think not everybody has, I still feel like we're in an optimistic phase right now. I think we've had an incredible 5 years. I'd love to get your thoughts around how you've seen tech in London change in the last couple of years, and what else we can do. I mean, obviously you've worked a lot in the Valley, you've worked a lot across the States.
Oh, it's so much bigger. I only come every few years, so I only see it at increments, but I just feel like the level of sophistication and just the volume of interest in entrepreneurship is dramatically higher each time. I'm trying to think I think I went to one of the early seed camps in like...
They're based upstairs.
Oh, really? Oh, that's funny, yeah. They didn't have a cool space like this, let me tell you. What was that, 2008, 2009 it would have been, right, when they started?
It's 10 years this year.
Yeah, so it was like slim pickings, It was not like this, okay? It was very, very weird to be doing it. And everybody was like, how do I convince people this is a legitimate thing? It was just like, it's a very different scene in those 10 years, so it's been quite remarkable. I mean, look, I think one of the problems with the level of transparency between startup hubs is it encourages a lot of comparisons. And so it's easy to be like Silicon Valley this, New York that, London this, and like, listen, I've been to plenty of startup hubs for whom London is an aspiration, and they think you guys have it so easy, and they are the ones that actually have to work for a living. So, everybody's got their complaints, but it sounds like it's going awesome. So, I mean, like I said, I've only been here 2 days on this trip, so I've not learned much yet, but I'm eager to learn more.
Amazing. I'm going to end with a couple of short fill-in-the-blank questions.
Okay. You can see that short is not really my forte, but I will do my best.
No, this is good, right? I think more Ghostbusters. I'm just going to encourage more Ghostbusters.
Yeah, exactly.
I always find inspiration in.
I'm sorry?
I always find inspiration in. And
music.
Then you...
Yeah, music for me.
Tell us more.
I thought you wanted short. I was going to fill in the blank. I tell you more. Yeah, no, that's, I mean.
You have to give an example.
I'm quite an introverted person, actually. So doing this kind of work, I actually find extremely draining. And so I have to find activities that involve not talking to people in order to recharge. So yeah, so to me, like being able to write music, to kind of like be in my own space there just for a minute is very helpful.
My next holiday will be to?
I haven't been on a vacation in a long, long time because I have 2 young kids and also this. So like, the idea that one day I could have a vacation where I'm not like full-time working on this or childcare or both is like, that sounds really nice.
A book that I recommend all the time is?
Okay, I'm not gonna, I mean, you guys read plenty of business books, so skip that. Plus, we are living through a total renaissance, golden age of science fiction. Has anyone noticed? There's these amazing, there's incredible new books. And I found myself recommending a lot in startup communities a book called Ancillary Justice. Any fans? Ann Leckie fans in the audience? No? Oh, you are all in for such a treat. The problem with this book is, I can't tell you anything about it that is not a spoiler. And you cannot look up any information about it online. Do not even read the description or the book jacket or anything. It will be absolutely, totally ruined. The publisher has no regard whatsoever for the spoiler issue that has to do with this book. It's really quite innovative. So Ancillary Justice is terrific.
And if I could only tell you one thing as a founder, it would be?
Everything you do as a founder is an experiment, whether you admit it or not. So may as well admit it and then try to do a good experiment. Amazing.
Okay, handing over to the audience, please say your name, what you're working on, and please let's stick to questions, not comments, if I can ask kindly. One right at the back.
Hi there. I'm Sainath, and I'm working on a product where we just run price draws. It's like a lottery, but it's free. People can enter for free, and then they can win prizes. And
you just mint money for free?
Yeah, kind of. So
I can't tell if I'm excited or horrified. I'm not sure. I think I don't totally understand. Okay, awesome. Okay, free money. I like it.
So I liked it as well, and that's why I started it. And then, it was all supposed to be funded by advertisements. We started something here. We spent a lot of time and lost a lot of money in UK. We had
giving away money for free.
Yeah, giving away. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I can see both sides of it. Yeah. Okay. All right,
and we got like 400 customers. I thought we would get more.
Yeah.
But it just died, even before we started. So we went to India, sort of wanted to try the same thing in a different place, and we started the campaign. We just had like a kickoff labs page, nothing with the product. We just went there, and after reading the book, of course, Lean Startup, that's after I read the book that we went to India. So
good choice.
We got like 7,500 customers in less than a month, and so many signups, and it's still growing at a very rapid pace.
Congratulations.
But still, we have there were some lessons that we learned, something like things to do with retention and things like that.
Yeah.
So, what sort of experiments would you recommend that we do now that we have large data set? We can experiment a bit more, but we don't know what the right questions are to ask. No, exactly the scope creep that you talked about. That's where we are. I decided, okay, we will do something like
with such a big room. If I can really ask for concision with questions,
yeah,
I'm sorry.
Yeah,
sorry about that.
Just to be fair, thank you.
Okay, so we could do this all night because I think it's a very fascinating situation. First of all, kudos on getting to the right market for this, and not just American entrepreneurs are always like, well, I'll just launch it in America over again and again and again and again. I'm like, no, there's different places in the world. Really? Oh. Remarkable. So good choice. And of course, you're going to give money away for free. You want to be in a less developed country because it's cheaper to do so. It seems like so obvious now that you said the answer. Why didn't you just start in India in the first place? But exactly, right? So I can't tell from your question whether the problem is that you don't know what hypotheses to test, or you have a bunch of hypotheses and you can't tell which one's more valuable to test. So if it's the former, you don't know enough to know what you want customers to do, then you want to do qualitative testing, get out of the building, the old customer development playbook of spend time with customers, look them in the whites of their eyes, talk to them, really immerse yourself in the problem that you're trying to solve for them. If the problem really is that you give people money for free, then it'd be very easy to find people who would like to get free money. That's not going to be hard. So this should be very easy to gather hypotheses. If the problem is that you're not sure which hypotheses are more valuable than others, for example, you might be having a debate on your team, should we focus on more efficient customer acquisition or improving long-term customer retention? Which is more valuable? The only way to answer those questions is to really do the leap of faith assumption analysis to understand how your assumptions about customers add up to a macroeconomic business outcome that matters. There's a whole chapter about it in the book. And then once you understand what the sensitivities of your model are, then you can say, well, let's focus our energy to do a series of experiments all designed around the same hypothesis. Let's see, is retention something that we can move through product changes or not? If that's the most important thing. You might discover it can't be moved, you can't build a retention-oriented business, and you have to switch to what we call a different engine of growth. But then that's a really easy pivot to do because you'll have done everything possible to examine one assumption at a time. That's the short answer to your question. Good luck.
This gentleman here.
Hi there.
And we've got a microphone just coming, sorry.
Thanks. Hi, I'm Raphael, the founder of a company called WeVat. We're a CCAM-based company digitizing tax-free shopping. So I really like the point that you made about breeding entrepreneurs and giving them the resources within a company so that they can do that. But not everybody is a natural-born entrepreneur.
Sure.
So how would you go about recruiting, training, structuring teams? Would you try and encourage everyone to be an entrepreneur, or would you acknowledge these differences as well?
How big is your team?
At the moment, 5, but we expect to get to 12.
So these problems are a long way off.
Yeah, exactly.
So the truth is that once you get to a certain scale, and I don't know what the magic number is, but I think it might even be like 100 or 100, 200. I mean, certainly by the time you get to 1,000 employees, you automatically, just through the normal distribution of talents and random chance, you automatically will have entrepreneurs working for you, whether you intend to hire them or you don't. It's just, that's how it is. And what happens is in most organizations, we say that we value creativity and employee passion, but we don't really mean it. If people show too much initiative and have too much creativity at work, they get fired. So everyone learns to hide their true nature and pretend to be a corporate drone, even if they're not. So we actually operate at great expense to the corporate treasury, a creativity dampening field to prevent people from acting in an innovative way. And we actually pay people to enforce this anti-innovation system to prevent anyone from accidentally innovating ever. That's why we have to have skunk works and secret off-book projects and all this other nonsense, because we deliberately create that environment. So yes, there are differences between people. Being an entrepreneur is not actually that much fun, and it really isn't for everybody. But we're far too quick to assume that that means we can tell who's an entrepreneur and who's not. We have a real bad case of this in Silicon Valley, and we're getting pummeled for it 100% rightfully right now, as we realize we had our head up our, you know what? So the problem is you can't tell by looking at someone or reading their resume whether they have the right stuff or not. You have to put them in a context to be able to run the experiment to find out. Most people themselves don't even know. Most of us don't dream of becoming an entrepreneur one day. I almost feel like it's like such a masochistic dream that I wonder like about people who feel that. I mean, I've never felt that way myself, so maybe there's people who feel that way and it's perfectly healthy, but it makes me really nervous. Most of the really great entrepreneurs, you know, like they got the entrepreneurial bug in the context of some problem they were excited about solving or some impact that they wanted to have. Or if we're being honest, because they really thought it would be a good way to get rich. But again, like if they can do math and you think it's a good way to get rich, I'm just like, are you sure you can do math? It's really not. Like there's so many more lucrative ways to make money. So I think that we should, instead of trying to filter people, we should run a system, a management system that gives everybody the opportunity to put their ideas to the test all the time. That's what meritocracy really should mean. Good ideas can actually come from everywhere. And we don't know in advance who's going to have the good ideas, so we should give people an opportunity to test their ideas out. And since most ideas are actually terrible, we can't afford to test everybody's ideas all the time. We have to have a system for letting people discover for themselves through entrepreneurial techniques which ideas are actually good, and then double down on those. I have been shocked doing this last 5 years how often I am accused of using nefarious methods in my workshops. People are like, what did you put in the water? Was it hypnotism? How did you turn this like boring corporate IT guy into an amazing entrepreneur in 3 days? I'm like, there's no trick. It's not like, hey, click here for that one weird trick to whatever. It's just you change the incentives, you change the team structure, you change the structure and context around them. And like, here's the thing. This person was just as creative the day before as the day after, but before they were afraid to tell you. So that's my 2 cents on it.
And gentleman here.
Mani Janaki Raman, startup founder of a company that is trying to offer live skill videos on an app. Question is, Reid Hoffman recently said that, not recently, some time ago, before, said that the first mover advantage does not go to a company that launches, but rather it goes to a company that scales.
Yeah,
so
that's 100% true.
As startup entrepreneurs, we are and we are very much on to get the initial things out. When can we take that leap of faith to really think big and go on a scale?
So scale is a consequence of having the right product and marketing and what they call product market fit. It's not a choice. You don't get to decide. Prematurely scaling like kills most companies because product market fit is a very distinctive experience. If you've never lived through product market fit, it's quite a wild ride. If you have time to ask someone if it's time to scale, then you don't have product market fit. People who have product market fit do not have time to ask anybody any questions other than, oh my God, how do I keep this thing from killing me? Like it's like a lethal form of growth, and you have to like build this massive army. Like it's a very distinctive experience. Trust me, if you've never been through it. And the problem with the product market fit, like literature such as it is, the like 8 blog posts have been written about it. It's a very scarce topic. Is they all are of the same form. You'll know it when you see it. So like, don't worry. You'll know when it's time to scale. I promise you will know it's time to scale. If you're not sure if it's time to scale, it's not time to scale. The problem with that is then people are like, but hold on, how do I know how close to product market fit I am? Because being 90% of the way there, it feels exactly the same as being 0% of the way there. And most of the literature has no answer to that question. I've tried to make, as part of Lean Startup, a mathematical system for answering that question. That's the origin of what we call innovation accounting and the system of leading indicators and the metrics that we use during the flat part of the hockey stick. The purpose of all that is to be able to rigorously answer how close are we getting closer to product market fit. So depending on the kind of business you have, like if you said, hey, I want to create a viral business like Facebook, I would say, well, first of all, let's figure out what your viral coefficient is. If your viral coefficient is 1.0 or greater, you're going to experience exponential growth, and I guarantee you will not have time to come to this thing and get your book signed because you'd be like, oh shit, exponential growth. So, but then like the difference between a viral coefficient of 0.1, 0.5, 0.9, from a vanity metrics point of view, if you, viral is horrible because you're going to have exponential growth or exponential decay. So if it's less than 1, the thing's going to keep driving itself down to 0, and you can't actually really tell the difference from like the vanity metrics to be bad, 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 bad. So you have to be able to measure the viral coefficient to figure out, are we actually improving it from 0.1 to 0.2 to 0.5 to 0.9? And I've met teams that are like at 0.9 and ready to give up. And I'm like, you're so close, you almost got it. And then I have teams that are like at 0.1, they're like, this next product release is definitely going to make us go all the way. And you're just like, you've been at this for a while, maybe a pivot might be worth considering. So that's how I answer your question.
I think we had one over here.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi. It's not work. Yeah, it's work now. Hi, Eric. Thank you for interesting talk. My name is Tauri, and I'm from WebArcs. It's a web security or cybersecurity company. We are protecting websites, and we are quite early stage. We have clients, and we have also angel investment. But my question is that if you think that what stage we are, what would be your recommendation that what to not do and what we have to do? Thank you.
You're not going to like my answer to this question, which is that there's no general purpose advice that is applicable by stage, other than the most generic advice to do a good job at doing the things you need to do in your stage. I mean, seriously. You know, the general lean startup advice of figure out what your leap of faith assumptions are, figure out which of those is the most risky, build experiments to test that experiment as soon as, I mean, like, you didn't need to come and hear me tell you that. I mean, like, yeah, you read the book or like ask anybody for advice. They'll all tell you the same thing now. So I don't feel like I have anything really very useful to say. And I guess my general perspective here would be, you don't want that kind of advice anyway. I'm an engineer, so I still believe in the principle of garbage in, garbage out. If the person giving you advice doesn't know anything about your situation or context, then they can't give you good advice. It's impossible. So I would really recommend that if you have the kind of question that you try to find somebody who knows what the hell they're talking about in your space, in your sector, who's like, when I'm a CEO, I'm always looking for CEOs who have done something similar but a few stages ahead. And I'm not talking about they're in the same industry as me, they're a competitor. I mean more like, they've had to do the kind of fundraising I have to do, and they've done it, but they're like at Series C and I'm at Series A, so you know, I go get fundraising advice for them, but they've done it recently. You know, you don't want to hear about, here's what the fundraising advice was 25 years ago. You're like, I need to know what it's like right now. So I might look for mentors who can give you a little bit more contextually rich recommendations.
And then we have one in the front row. Yes. Sorry. No, it's okay.
It's coming, it's coming.
Just so the guys back in here.
Hi, my name is Selma, and I'm working on corporate venture and innovation in the HR space. And I was wondering how you, thank you. I just started a month ago, so a lot to learn, but.
So still very optimistic about it, good.
Yeah, so I was wondering how you keep the appetite for innovation alive at a large multinational while also tempering expectations for getting the new shiny toy, like you were talking about. You have to have product market fit before you scale.
So maybe at your friend's company?
Sorry?
We can talk about your friend's company for a second.
Exactly.
Yeah, just as a hypothetical question about, yeah, I mean, well, actually, so there's a great example of this in the HR space in the book. So we did a really awesome project at GE where we completely transformed their system they call EMS. Like GE's like legendary employee management system. People who have like just gotten the memo about how it's awesome for employees to have KPIs are like reinventing this thing from like 30 years ago. So GE was like, well, they were there before the rest of us. They had this amazing system, everybody has KPIs, and it's really great, except that it's really not that good for innovation because the KPIs are all functionally driven and it's all numerical rating and it's actually quite demotivating and has these, you know, it's like amazing for the time that it was designed, and it's not a little creaky at this point. And one of the people who was involved in the creation of FastWorks, which is GE's version of Lean Startup that we built together, is an HR professional, and so it was really important that whole transformation was driven by a cross-functional team of engineering, marketing, HR, IT, and finance. So think about the VPs of all those functions, like the kind of problems they can clear just by getting in a room together and clearing them is amazing. So the HR person had this realization that the company needed to change its values, change how it did employee ratings, the whole thing. And they went to their leadership at first, and we're going to change all this stuff. And they said, no way, we're never going to change that. And they like patiently were working on leadership. No, we got to change. Fastworks was great because it gave us this massive database of teams that were trying to do innovation and all the different systemic, what I call the deep systems of the company that get in their way. HR is a repeat and serial offender of problems. So eventually they got senior management excited about a change. And they said, okay, we want to experiment with getting rid of ratings and changing how incentive compensation is done, rewrite the values. And senior management has this thing where they're like, no, 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 no. Why isn't this done yesterday? Because you've been saying no all this time. They're like, well, now I want it, like last week I want it rolled out company-wide. You're like, we haven't even said yes yet. You skipped over the step where you say yes, congratulations, it's a good idea. Now you're just mad at me that it wasn't already done. So that's like very senior executive disease. So this team, they went through that exact thing, and senior management was like, all right, we're sold, let's go company-wide. And they're like, listen, boss, a second ago, when I thought you hated this idea, I told you that the way I thought we should proceed was running a small experiment and then scaling it up if and only if it works, after we learn what works. And they're like, boss, now that I know that you love this idea, my recommendation is that we still run the experiment to find out if it's a good idea or not. Like, the fact that you love it is not actually the information that we need, which was a incredibly controversial thing to say in this context. I mean, the senior executives were like, are you questioning my judgment? And they were like, I'm just saying that we should get some facts using empirical science, right? Tiptoe. And so anyway, it was fascinating. And then as this project evolved, and I tell the whole story in the book, you can read all about it, because they did like the initial MVPs, like looked awesome, and they had this cool app that you could get on your phone, and they would make it really cool and fun to rate your manager while they're rating you. And then like they deployed it to a test group, and everyone was like, I love the idea, I definitely want to get 360 feedback and rate my manager. And then they looked at the data and they're like, nobody rated their manager. They're like, the app doesn't work, so we got to make the better app with better UI, da, 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 da. Eventually they were like, still no one's rating their manager, what's up with that? They were like, maybe we should go ask them what's going on. And everyone's like, you want me to rate my what? The person who's rating me. I'm supposed to tell them that they're doing a bad job? I'm going to say no. No, thank you. So like, of course, it wasn't a technology problem, it was a behavioral call. And so like, this thing went on, they had a 500 pilot group, and then they eventually got to a 5,000 person pilot group, and then they got to a 12,000, they scaled it up, and they got to 100,000. And what's so funny is that I was helping them as a coach through this process, so I can tell the story. They would alternate, they would have this, they had a board of directors, we call it a growth board in GE, an internal board they would report progress to. And like every other meeting, the board would either be like, this isn't working, shut it down, or why isn't this rolled out to 100% of customers? You just told us to shut it down, and now you want it rolled out to 100%. Like, it was so hard to keep the executives on track for like, if it's working, increase the order of magnitude. If it's not working, scale it back. What does working mean? Like, what are the metrics? Like, they'd be like, we want productivity and retention and this and a free pony. And they watch my guys like, okay, those are a lot of different things. What's our objective? Which one do you want? Like, what's more important? Is it more important to have higher morale or better retention? Like, what do you want us to measure? It took a lot of negotiating, but they really did it. And they eventually built this thing, and they rolled it out company-wide. GE has 300,000 employees, so like, it really was an S-curve of deployment, just like you would see in a startup that achieved product market fit. And what people don't believe about the story generally, including many of you in the audience right now, is that these HR professionals who, if you looked at their resume, you'd be like, HR lifers, acted like real entrepreneurs. And you're like, no, they didn't. I know, but they did. I was there. I saw it. So I'm either lying to you or I was hallucinating. But I saw it with my own eyes. So that's like, you can look at the book for sort of more detail about it. But I think like really treat HR deployments like startup problems where customers have a choice in the matter, and don't do it by corporate mandate from central. It can be very impactful at your friend's company.
Okay, one right at the back.
Hi, Eric. My name is Guy.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. Thank you very much for being here tonight.
Thank you.
And I would like to ask you, what's your thoughts on decentralized platforms such as Ethereum, and what do you think its future is going to be? If you have some thoughts about that.
Oh man, I got so many thoughts.
Please tell me
first
everything.
of all, like blockchain is like hotter than God in the VC right now. It's like blockchain, drones, and
Still drones?
what's that? People still love their
Still
drones.
drones?
Yeah, but no, yeah, it's true. Blockchain is definitely hotter than drones right now, and AR, VR. Drones I think have fallen out of this category. 2 product areas where there's like amazing technological breakthroughs and like almost no customer use cases. So it's like, no wonder VCs love it. So I'm really bullish on blockchain. I think like as a computer scientist, when I read the Bitcoin paper, I was like, this is such a brilliant and elegant solution to a problem. And like, of course, I didn't then like carry on that to buy any Bitcoin. So don't take my advice. What do I know? I think there's a couple of core problems that really have not been solved in any of these coins that make me very nervous. The first is if Bitcoin can be forked so that there's two equivalent coins and the miners can choose to do that, then in what way is Bitcoin actually deflationary and have a fixed pool of coins? Miners can just make more coins whenever they want, and the miners haven't figured this out yet, but eventually the miners will realize that whoever has a majority gets to decide what version of the software gets run. So if the majority of miners got together and said, hey, why don't we write our own software that gives us special privileges over everybody else? They could just be like, guess what? We've upgraded to Bitcoin Plus. And like, we have all the mining power, so what can you do about it? You don't like Bitcoin Plus? Like, we have the chain. So I think there's some like kind of fundamental questions that haven't been answered. I think there's also a fundamental misunderstanding of securities regulation and central banking that I think is really quite weird. If you imagine a central bank that was like, I'm going to create my own token that's exactly the same as Bitcoin in every way, except it's redeemable on a one-for-one basis for 1 unit of my currency. So one coin, I call them Fed coins. One Fed coin is equal to $1 US for the purpose of paying your taxes. Like, it'd be very easy to get people to switch to Fed coin from Bitcoin because it has an actual use, like that is immediately has a guaranteed floor of what it can be worth. And then you could be like, and the Fed is going to periodically change the inflation rate, change the rule. We control the software, we control the keys, and like all of a sudden we've reinvented central banking using coins. So I feel like the fact that we haven't really grappled with those issues are pretty significant. And then just fundamentally, I mean, I'm all excited about distributed autonomous corporations, especially. I just think like that's like a sci-fi staple going way back. So it's like finally we're going to have, but like we really need some use cases for what this technology can be used for other than making this technology. And we just don't have it. We have like kidnapping, drugs, like we have like some pretty shady things. We have a whole bunch of coin offerings that are indistinguishable from Ponzi schemes. I'm sure some of them are legit, but like all of them are legit. Anyone want to put money on that? Come on. What is this actually like? And then like everyone's like, it's going to replace banking, replace central banks, replace currency, replace gold, or whatever. And it's just like between it's not useful for anything except for blackmail, and it's going to replace the entire fractional reserve banking system. Are there any intermediate use cases that we can find for this? And people are hunting for them, so I look forward to the killer app happening. But I'm very suspicious of platforms that lack a killer app. I'd like to understand what the platform is good for from a customer point of view if we could find something. And so the fact that like the only thing that makes Bitcoin a hot sector is the speculation activity that it enables, and that our grandparents learned this whole lesson the hard way. So I'm a little bit skeptical.
We had one right at the back in the check shirt.
Mike, serial entrepreneur, current Googler. What professional achievement are you most proud of, and what's your greatest regret?
I don't know, man. That's hard.
We've covered shame a few times tonight, haven't
What's that?
We've covered shame a few times tonight, haven't we?
Yeah, sure. It's more like the regret is like, where do I start? Biggest regret. Well, it's funny what pops into your head in these moments. So I think about all of the financial opportunities that I missed out on. Like that's kind of the curse of being in the startup space. So like, when Facebook was like, in 2008, however big it was in 2008, like tiny, they were recruiting me to come run engineering for them. And like Sheryl Sandberg sat me down and gave me the rocket ship speech and the whole thing. And I was like, I don't think so. And I decided to do Lean Startup instead. So Lean Startup was very expensive from an opportunity cost point of view. I still have that offer letter somewhere. If I want to, I can go look up exactly how expensive it was. But yeah, I don't know. I didn't get into this business to make money, so I kind of feel like, do I really regret? Do I really regret how it's turned out? Like, not really. And of course, like in the counterfactual that I went to work there, like who knows what would have happened? Like, maybe something great, but plenty of horrible things could have happened too. Maybe if I had made a movie about me getting screwed, you know, you just never know how it's going to turn out. It can be horrible. So I don't know. And, you know, and like a lot of the early lean startup companies, like if I had any brains at all, I would have been investing in those companies, like duh, instead of like trying to like sell them whatever to teach them lean startup. I should have been like, you know, writing checks, but I didn't understand. So, you know, so I feel like I was a little slow on the uptake to understand what my role in the ecosystem was going to be, because everything is obvious once you know the answer. But there's no way I could have known that. It's like, how was I supposed to figure that out then? I mean, I don't really know. What was it a professional accomplishment I'm most proud of? I don't know, because everything cascades into everything else. So like, of course, I'm very proud of the book. I'm very proud of having written Lean Startup and having it blown up. But like, it wasn't the writing of the book that I'm proud of. It's having like had the conceptual breakthrough in the first place, and then having the willingness to test it out. So I'll give you an example from very early on in Lean Startup. I had just started blogging about it, like maybe only for a few months, when Tim O'Reilly summoned me to Sebastopol to meet with him. He has a great early radar for new ideas. Like, he just has an amazing network of people who said, hey, this is something you should pay attention to. And I'd grown up on the O'Reilly books, programming books, so it was like, ooh, go to meet Santa Claus or something. It was exciting. And I went to Sebastopol. I said, this is going to be, he was telling me, this is going to be a thing. You should write a book. You should have a conference. You should do this. And I was like, sign me up, let's go, you know, whatever. And of course, like, he's the charismatic founder of the company, but like then like the people actually have to implement his crazy ideas. Like, he has like 45 crazy ideas a day, so it wasn't like, from his point of view, he's like, let's go, let's get this done. And then like, you know, his team was like, you know, dragging their feet, and nothing really happened for a long time. So like, they could have owned the Lean Startup franchise entirely. I would have sold the whole thing to them for nothing. And but anyway, as a result of that, I eventually wound up getting to speak at the Web 2.0 Expo. Big tech conference is now gone, but you know, whatever the year that was. Web 2.0 Expo. And it was one of the first times I was going to give a big talk about Lean Startup. And I was super nervous about it, because I'd never talked at a company. I'd never done that before. I didn't have slides, I didn't have anything. And I was like, I'm going to take this, for whatever reason, I was like, I'm going to take this speech seriously. I'm going to treat it like a startup. So I had a customer advisory board for the talk, who reviewed slides with me, and like, we went to all kinds of different concepts. I was blogging constantly to run experiments and test ideas on people and hype up the fact that the event was going to happen, and whatever. And I remember, you know, I gave the talk, and the room was like totally packed. It's at the Moscone Center, if you've been there in San Francisco, and I was not a keynote speaker. This is a breakout room, and the breakout rooms had like, I could hold like 600-700 people in them. And mine was like standing room only, and there was like people, like, you couldn't get into that room. And I was like, wow, this conference is a lot bigger than I thought, if they can fill up all the breakout rooms. Little did I know that I had like really pissed off a bunch of other people who were speaking in that time slot. I like sucked all the people into this room. Anyway, I gave a talk, and went great, and then they had like a little Q&A session. You go to a different room to like answer questions about it, to go more in depth. And I walk over with some friends there, and I get to the Q&A room, and it's so full that I can't get into the room. And I was with a friend of mine. I was like, that's really rude of the previous speaker to not clear out the room, because now I can't get in to give. I was like, God, I got to sit here and wait for this previous session to wrap up. And finally, someone's like, no, you dummy. The people are here for you. I was like, what? You know, like, it was like crazy to me that people were so excited about it. That talk, unbeknownst to me, somebody illicitly made a bootleg copy. There was somebody with an early iPhone, and they were like, oh, this is cool, and they hit record. And then they uploaded it. They didn't upload it to YouTube. They uploaded it to SlideShare. Okay, that's how old the story is. And that slide deck started circulating. Somebody sent it to Scott Cook, the founder of Intuit. And he summoned me to Mountain View to meet with Intuit. And that was the first time someone was like, I want to talk to you about how this might apply to big companies. And Scott Cook is like, he's like the principal of Silicon Valley. You know, whatever he says goes. He's amazing. And just like this like cascading series of events, all totally contingent on one after the other, like kind of set this thing in motion. And I always wonder, if I had phoned it in and hadn't bothered to take that event seriously, and no one had shown up and the talk had been a bomb, would I have been like, screw it, let's go to Facebook. So I'm pretty proud of how it turned out, and I'm glad that I took it seriously, even though in retrospect, like, you know, I don't know if it was even the right decision, but I feel pretty good about that.
It's an amazing story. I think we had one over here that keeps being in the black. And I think we only have time for 2 or 3 more questions, so do be thinking of yours.
Okay, yeah.
All right, so
Make
I'm
them
going to be quick. Thanks, Eric, for the talk. It was very interesting. I'm co-founder of one of the startups that Sarah mentioned before, which is the ML residency program startups. And you nailed it, absolutely. Like, because of the technology that we work with, there are just so many creative ideas that you can go on with. And especially my team is so creative, we actually have solutions which, like, if we really go through and implement, they will work.
Yeah.
But then I'm going to ask again about when you talk about how to keep the focus of the team.
Yeah.
And actually, because I think to keep the focus, you have to keep them motivated. And I think the example that you gave about company going bust, I don't think it's a good motivation. So I'm just going to ask you, like, could you talk a little bit more about, like, how you can motivate and not repeat the same thing again and again, because it's really a fact for a startup that you could go bust if you don't really focus on one thing.
Yeah.
Even if you know that the other things are really cool and you can even publish papers. So yeah, just a little bit more about it.
Get promoted and have good things happen to you while the company dies. Yeah. So you gotta be careful with that. No. So first of all, I happen to be of the school that creating a false sense of safety for the team is counterproductive. It's a short-term trade-off. You make people feel comfortable and calm and they don't freak out. But like, first of all, you can never suppress the underlying anxiety. So like, it's kind of a soporific effect. And secondly, when the shit hits the fan, if you don't mind my expression, people will feel like you betrayed them. Why didn't you tell me we were in such a bad situation? Like, I actually would rather your team freak out. And if someone's going to quit now because they don't want to be in a startup, that's actually better for everybody. Seriously, like, people need to know what they're getting into, need to understand that it's highly uncertain, and that they need that nervous energy. So I happen to think, like, level with people, tell them the truth. Don't be doom and gloom about it, but just like, listen, here's how much runway we have. Here's how many more shots on goal we get. If we don't figure this out, we're dead. Anyway, how would you have for breakfast? You know, that's you got to have a just completely calm, neutral conversation about that. I would have it at least once every 6 weeks with the whole team. But to answer your question, for the motivation thing, I think the hardest thing is to design the technology to solve one particular use case as good as you can. And this is such a common mistake. There's actually a whole chapter about it in Jeffrey Moore's Crossing the Chasm. Anyone read Crossing the Chasm? Like, classic book of technology management. He literally is like, and engineers are constantly wanting to create a general purpose platform that can do everything 80% well, but can't do any one thing 100% well, and that the literature is very clear on the subject that that can't work, and yet we keep doing it over and over again. So I think you got to get the team excited about, here's the magic for me anyway. It's not that we're only ever going to do this one thing. It's that after we nail this one thing, we're going to nail the next thing and nail the next thing. And over time, we will refactor our amazing platform out of really amazing use cases that really work better than anything that exists in the world. And I was once giving this pitch to an entrepreneur, and he was like, come on, man, can you name even one company that did it that way? I was like, oh man, you understand that every successful platform that we use today, they were all built this way. That's the only way that they can be built. And I was like, he was like so far gone that he couldn't think of a single one. And it's just like, you know, was the Facebook platform a platform? Was the iPhone platform a platform? Like, was hypertext a platform? Like, can you imagine if those products had had no use case? We can imagine, because we do it all the time. We, for some reason, are obsessed with it. And anyway, there's a reason why you have to do it this way. And it's not just like customers are important and you go run out of money, whatever. There's a technical reason, which is that to build a general purpose platform, you have to know what the technical requirements are. I was joking before that, what's really required? What does the platform have to be actually good for? And if you don't know the answer to that question, you wind up having to solve a series of technical problems that are usually the wrong problems. So like every API interface, every user interface, every platform of any kind, you have to make technical trade-offs about what do you make easy and what do you make hard and what do you make impossible. If you don't know what kind of application you're trying to make, you can't answer those questions well. So like imagine trying to design a GUI without a word processor. Can't be done. Never has been done, never will be done. They didn't even do it that way at Xerox PARC. So, you know, you got to get your team excited about the possibility of solving a certain customer problem, and you have to promise them that we're not collapsing our vision. We're just running the race one step at a time.
I want to particularly call out to the women in the room, given that we have 2 more questions.
Yeah, seriously.
I'm going to go this lady here.
Yeah. Thank you for doing that.
No problem.
Hi, my name is Caitlin, and I run a branding consultancy specifically for Chinese businesses as well as US, UK, kind of trying to break into China, or Chinese business trying to break out of China.
Oh, yeah.
So I actually work with a lot of...
It's really hard.
Yeah, because the internet's different. They don't have
Yeah, right,
Google
exactly.
in China.
The branding
so
would be, the branding requirements
being
would be very
Chinese
different.
is an advantage. Yeah.
Yeah.
So my question is, I work with a lot of startup funders and entrepreneurs, and sometimes I just don't really quite believe in the ideas, and I have to brand their products and ideas.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering, you must kind of encounter a lot of entrepreneurs and things like that, and I could be totally wrong about someone and some ideas. So how do you decipher what will be kind of gut feeling, or is there a kind of test that you can tell whether or not someone or an idea?
You already heard me say that I decided not to work at Facebook, right? So what do I really know? Seriously. I could have worked at pre-IPO Google, too. I got a terrible track record when it comes to these things, so, you know, whatever. And I was like, I don't know if I want to really invest in Dropbox or whatever. It's just, too much hassle.
Like the person, character, and...
Drew Houston seemed amazing. I just didn't even occur to me that, like, Dropbox was going to be a thing. Mark Zuckerberg's, like, who was incredible. I remember asking him, Mark, I really want to understand how Facebook is going to make money. And he's like, it's obvious. I was like, I know to you, but could you explain it to me? No. Okay. So like, I was like, what does that guy know? Oops, right? Nope. It was in fact obvious, and he was trying to challenge me to like, okay, like, well, whatever, since it worked out, he gets to lord it over me, not the reverse. But I don't know how to answer your question. I think as a service business, if you have the luxury of choosing your clients, you should choose clients you believe in. If for no other reason, then you'll learn a lot more that way. Because what happens, my experience, you see this with investors or any kind of service business, if you take on a client and you're kind of, I don't know if this is really going to work, and then it doesn't work, how do you know if that was your fault or the client's fault? You're going to say, well, my branding work was as good as could be, but this thing sucked. So then you'll never learn whether you actually could have had a chance to make a difference or not. I would much rather you be in situations where you say, I love this thing, it's amazing, this one's definitely going to make the cut, and then it doesn't. And then you'll really be forced to challenge and re-examine your assumptions. Like, listen, for me, choosing not to work at Google and choosing, like, those were very important learnings for me. I was like, okay, I had a strong hypothesis about what was going to happen here. I was wrong. That's a good chance for me to learn. So I think you want to put yourself in those situations where you have conviction. But like, look, you got to eat. So sometimes you got to take on crappy clients just because you got to take them. I understand that. But if you have the chance to choose, I would rather you spend. It's like life is too short. Work on things you believe in.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
And final question, had a hand up just there, yeah.
Eric, thank you so much for a really interesting and inspiring and amusing presentation this evening.
Thank you, I think.
So my question is about diversity in your...
Name and where you're from, please.
Sorry, my name is Philippa, and I work for a social enterprise which is actually based here at the campus building called Code First Girls.
Awesome.
And we work to try and encourage... Oh, yeah. Thank you so much.
You got fans.
We work to try and encourage more women to get into tech.
Yeah,
so I guess that's where I'm coming from with my question. Is it important to you to have diverse teams, not just in terms of gender, but in terms of age, ethnic diversity as well? I'm guessing you're going to say yes. So
well, everyone says that, but then you got to press them on whether they're full of shit or not. So, yeah. Let's talk about it.
That's my question. How do you actually encourage applications from a diverse audience? Because a lot of people I'm talking to are saying, we'd love to hire more women.
We have no pipeline, nobody applies, yeah.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. Oh my God. Okay, well, I don't know how much time we have. This drives me crazy. And just so you know, like, of all the things I've ever written in Silicon Valley, you know, and I've been pretty controversial from time to time, like, nothing compares to having written on this topic and like the absolute deluge of flaming emails I get from white dudes who are pissed at me is like unbelievable. On Twitter, I get a lot of very diverse community who thinks it's great, and in my inbox, it's like, how dare you suggest such a thing? It's like unreal. And I'm actually kind of embarrassed about it now. I kind of stopped writing about it because I was like, it's, you know, enough. Like, I don't, you know, I'm not trying to like piss everybody off. And I feel like as more of these revelations become more public, you start to realize, wait a minute, like we have more of an obligation to do this, even though it's uncomfortable. So shame on me. What did I have to lose? Okay, some people yelled at me, like, whatever. A lot of worse things could have happened. So I feel it very personally. The thing that it really drives me crazy about it is, first of all, we want to be a meritocracy, but we're obviously not. I mean, seriously, what are the odds that a perfectly meritocratic selection process produces this extremely homogeneous outcome. Just do the frickin' math. Like, you just, whatever your crazy beliefs are about eugenics and the superiority of this group over that, like, do the math. How different would the median have to really be? And do the fat tail and now all this racist crap? Like, it would have to be so crazily different. And then it's like, is there even one shred iota of any academic research anywhere that shows that that distribution looks like that? No, there isn't. And in fact, all research shows that they're practically indistinguishable. So, okay, first of all, like, give me a break. Second of all, people are like, oh, it's too hard. I can't figure it out. It's a mystery to me. And it's like, have you even done the most elementary, basic first steps towards getting the outcome that you want? No, you haven't? Then you're not a meritocracy. I call complete and total bullshit. So for example, one of the essays I wrote once was trying to get people to apply that simple lesson from symphony orchestras. That when people started auditioning behind a screen so you couldn't see the performer, the ratio of male and female performers went from basically 0% female to 50-50. And it's like the screen made the women perform so much better. Well, there is some research about maybe it did. But in particular, like much more likely the scenario is that if you can't tell, you can't be biased. And people don't want to be biased. They can't help it. It's an automatic reflex. It's a negative consequence of the fact that we have good pattern recognition hardware that's built into our brains, and it's like it's a machine learning algorithm that's like been trained on very limited data. Like we understand this very well in the academic research. So I was like, okay, so please, when you're reviewing resumes, have your recruiter spend an extra 30 seconds to black out the name, ethnicity, and like geographic knowledge of who the person is. So when I first started doing that with resumes, I was shocked who I started interviewing. And I have this weird experience where I'd get someone on the phone and I'd be like, why did I choose this person? That's weird. And then I'd be like, oh, the person I'm saying that about, like, oh, never said that about a white person. Oh, that's interesting. Like, I was like, I wouldn't have thought that I'm a biased person, but like, we know that we are. So I was like, well, just before you do all this other complicated stuff, like at least do this one very basic, elementary, simple thing. And I couldn't get anyone to do it. No one ever does it. So I'm like, you're not a meritocracy. You're not even trying. Don't give me this crap. So that drives me crazy. But then people are like, but it doesn't matter whether I have a fair filter or not because of the pipeline problem. Nobody applies for my job. But like, what kind of an idiot would you have to be to apply to a job at a racist company? If they're like a misogynistic bunch of bros and you're a woman, why would you apply? Like, people are not stupid and they don't have unlimited time to like go to a demeaning and horrible interview experience. Like so like, the companies and organizations that have taken the time to systematically signal that they're going to be meritocratic for real, and that's not just an excuse to just hire their buddy, like they see a materially different pipeline of people that apply. So it's like, this is one of those rare situations where the symbolic is the real. Not only like, but you take symbolic action, even if you don't think it's that important to make the process more fair, it changes who applies. It has like this virtuous effect. Not to mention all the evidence that's ever been done on the sun that diverse teams perform better, like as if we cared about that all of a sudden, right? Like we're actually trying to make successful companies, right? It's not just some charity project, like, right? It should matter that diverse teams outperform. When we changed the selection process we use at the Lean Startup Conference and publicized that we had changed it, our pipeline instantly changed. Instantly, like from one year to the next, we went from I think 20% female to 50%, and in 2 years, we were majority people of color. It was crazy how fast it changed. Just because we were like, we will actually evaluate you fairly, so you have a chance to. And it was like astonishing. The team I built for the long-term stock exchange, LTSE, is gender balanced, even though we're in finance and technology. And like, it's just not that hard. So I just call bullshit on this whole conversation as full of people who are like not willing to like. Can you imagine if we applied the standards we use to the diversity conversation to the technology conversation? We're like, oh, I'm the most smart, amazing person who can change the world through the power of my mind. And everyone's like, oh, over here, I'm like this impotent, poor snowflake who can't do anything. You know, I just can't change anything. It's just the way it is. What are you going to do? It's like, does anyone else find that outrageous? I think it's total bullshit. So yeah, please don't be that person. Did I even answer your question? I'm sorry. Really pisses me off.
Heads up,
Yeah, thank you.
For any founders in the room looking to hire, Philippa has an amazing pool of 3,500 women that they've trained up as data science and junior devs. So do speak to her afterwards.
That sounds awesome.
I love that we're finishing on a topic that I personally care about an awful lot.
Yeah.
Eric has a taxi coming in 15 minutes. So we must end. For those of you that want to get your book signed very fast, please do come to the front at the end. But please join me in thanking Eric for a fantastic chat.